folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. This is Travis here at the Prepared Homestead. Yes, I'm driving. We're into our little Mennonite grocery store that's not too far from us to pick up some supplies. It's a lot better than going to someplace like a Walmart or other places, I think, at least for the fact that you don't have the crowds to deal with and all their weird regulations and stuff on purchasing. So anyways, I wanted to talk about something that amazingly is in the mainstream news. Something that I've been talking about on here for about a year, at least for 6 months. And many other people have been talking about this subject for quite a while now, you know, a couple of years with some people. And that is this solar minimum. In fact, it's called the grand solar minimum that we are currently under. And if you look up a lot of these mainstream articles, it's come out just in the past few days, and that's what's kind of caught my eye and why I wanted to bring it up again. It's because it's funny how, not that I put a lot of value in the mainstream media, but over the past year or so, when it's been talked about in certain, areas of the media, typically, social media, small media, any type of mainstream source, discounts it as some wacky conspiracy theory of this grand solar minimum. Well, now all of a sudden, guess what? It's been covered by some major news sources. I believe CNN and Fox News both ran an article this week. They're not calling it the grand solar minimum, at least I'm not seeing that. They're calling it an extended solar minimum, using all these little terms. But it's quite interesting that they're kind of now coming around to it. And what I found interesting in the articles is the way that they sound in the articles. It's like, oh, we just discovered that there's this solar minimum thing happening, this grand solar minimum. It just happened out of nowhere. Where in fact, many of us and many scientists, in fact, for the last few years have been, warning people, letting people know that, we are most likely going to be going into a grand solar minimum. And in the past 12 months or so, many of them have said, we are in a grand solar minimum. People need to get ready for this. Governments need to get ready for this. Food systems, farming, and things like that need to get ready for this. And of course, it all fell on deaf ears. And then now all of a sudden, now everyone wants to talk about it. If you don't know what a grand solar minimum is, I encourage you to go, search it online and learn more about it. To put it all in a nutshell, the sun goes through solar cycles of heating and cooling, increased solar activity, decreased solar activity every 11 years, and those are called solar minimums and solar maximums. But every so often, 100 years, 200 years or so, it goes through what's called a grand solar minimum, which it means that for a period of years, it reduces the amount of solar output, the amount of the sunspots, the amount of solar radiation, all those things are reduced for an extended period of time before finally the sun kind of wakes up and warms up again. And during those times of grand solar minimum, historically, it causes, the earth to cool just a little bit, changes the weather patterns a little bit, and it at times has assisted in going through what was called the mini ice age a couple of hundred years ago. And so now we are in that. And it's something that we need to be aware of. It's something that people need to, should be talking about. I think it's at least as important as this virus, if not more important, because they're saying that this could last, for the next 25 to 30 years potentially, before we should start seeing an uptick in solar activity. So what does that mean? And I think a lot of people that's kind of, discounting as some kind of crazy conspiracy is because a lot of people think that, when you hear about this and you hear about past mini ice age, people have this idea that, well, that means it's just going to be snow all year long, and and you know, these frigid, horrible temperatures, and that's not it at all. In fact, the mini ice age that the planet experienced, there was also an extremely large volcanic eruption that aided in that. So the combination of the two caused that. What it does do is it shortens your typical growing season for many regions. It will cause longer springs, you know, wetter, cooler springs, a lot more cloud cover, your fall to kind of hit a little earlier and, you know, kind of cool down. It can cause a little bit colder winters, and we're kind of already seeing that. And I know we're not seeing that everywhere, but to give you an example, here in the Ozarks today, and I don't know if the camera, if you can see it, but today it's cloudy, and I cannot, it's been at least, I think, 2 weeks since we've had a good day of full sunshine. Here we are going in towards the end of May, the latter part of May, and our high temperature today is 70, and this is the warmest day it's been in about a week. We've been in the, you know, low to mid 50s for about a week, and it's rained just an insane amount. We're already 12 inches above normal for our rainfall for the year. Now, of course, it'll probably dry out in the summer and get hot. I don't doubt that. But the point is that it's hurting the growing season. The ground temperature around here is just not where it needs to be. We've had a lot of rain, so it's been difficult to get the garden going. A lot of people, including us, have had a lot of difficulty of getting the garden going because it's rain, rain, rain. We had a really late freeze a couple of weeks ago, and there's been a lot of people all over the country, you know, talking about this cool, wet weather that the country is experiencing right now. And this is part of the grand solar minimum, and it's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better for quite a while, folks. This is going to go on for at least probably a couple more decades. They predict to probably somewhere around 2050, 2055 is where we're going to be experiencing this kind of weather. And you add to that with what's going on with this virus and the shutdown and all these meat plants shutting down, and farmers dumping milk, and farmers, you know, dumping their vegetables, and, you know, food shortages. And then throw on top of that this grand solar minimum, which I've talked about before, and we're seeing it. We're actually, you know, there's little bits, and a lot of people, experts in the industry, aren't saying that it's the grand solar minimum causing it, but it's pretty obvious that the weather pattern is doing pretty much what was expected because of this grand solar minimum. So it really kind of changes things. You know, forget what, you know, your opinions are of the pandemic, whether it's true, not, fake, real, planned. You know, it really doesn't matter at this point. The fact is that the consequences of the pandemic, of the virus, of the shutdown, of the, you know, stay at home, all that kind of stuff, those are real. And, you know, we're seeing it really hurt the economy. It's hurting the, you know, unemployment numbers are skyrocketing. And like I said, the food supply system is taking a hard hit because of this. And so we went through dumping all this food because restaurants and schools and stuff and stadiums were closed down. And so now they're opening back up, a lot of them. And do we have enough food? Well, we're going into a growing season that it's quite possibly, in the way it looks, I don't think we're going to have the best growing season for most of the country because of this. And it's not just the cloud cover, and it's not just the rain, and I'm not a scientist, but from what I've read, it's also the reduced solar rays and solar radiation that the plants need to grow, and so it's reducing their growing season. And what that means is it's going to reduce the amount of food being harvested. For instance, our garden, of course, you know, I'll show you guys at some point. You know, my tomato plants are half the size that they should be at this time, because we've had such a hard time of getting them in the ground because of the amount of rain constantly. and the fact that the ground temperature just isn't where it needs to be. It's not where it normally would be, so they're not growing at anywhere near the rate that what they would typically grow at. We should still have tomatoes, but it could reduce the amount of our harvest. So for those of you that are homesteaders and preppers, especially the gardening homesteaders, it could be kind of a little wrench thrown into your plan. You know, if your plan is to kind of live off of your food, off of your garden, and then what happens if you're not able to grow enough food? What's your plan? And that's something that we talk about. Do we just plant bigger gardens and hope that the amount, you know, of extra that we're planting will compensate for the loss of harvest due to changing weather patterns? That is an option, but that's not an option for everybody. One option that we're looking at, we're putting money back for, and hopefully at some point this year, it wouldn't be for this season, but hopefully this year we can get a good, larger greenhouse built, one that's big enough to have, you know, seed starter plants in it, and then also an area that we can actually just grow plants in it, and then maybe eventually have another one. And the greenhouse, you know, if you heat a greenhouse and if it's built properly, you can grow food in it all year long, even in our climate in the wintertime. But even if you don't heat it, what it does is it extends your growing season. So for even an unheated greenhouse, you could definitely increase your growing season enough to potentially compensate and make up for the fact of, you know, the lessened growing season because of the changing weather. And that's kind of our plan. I don't know what would work for you, but it's something that you should certainly consider, because, you know, most of you, I feel and have heard from, that part of your plan is to grow your own food. Well, you need to start working on your plan, because if you don't have it figured in of dealing with this grand solar minimum and how it may affect you, you know, can you still grow enough food to survive? And if this year's any example, if you're not able to get your food in the ground at the time that you need to, and it doesn't start really growing because the ground temperatures aren't high enough, and then what's going to happen if this fall hits us early potentially? What it's doing, it's greatly reducing your growing season, and it could really hit the amount of harvest that you're hoping to get. It could reduce it. So the point of the video is just do some research on it. There's a lot of good information out there on this grand solar minimum. There's also a lot of garbage out there, and so just try to kind of weed through it. There's a couple of good channels that talk a lot more about it and a lot more knowledgeable. One of them is a channel called Ice Age Farmer. The guy is super knowledgeable about grand solar minimum, and I believe a pretty trustworthy source, so you might check out his channel. But again, if growing your own food is a big part of your plan, especially now with all that's going on, you need to really start thinking hard about how you're going to compensate for this grand solar minimum. Doesn't mean you can't grow anything. It's not going to be the ice age, but it could definitely, you know, interfere with the amount of harvest that you would plan on getting in a normal growing season. So do the research and try to come up with some alternatives, or what you can do to compensate for what's going on with this grand solar minimum. Because between what's happening with the virus, this pandemic, the lockdown, the stay at home, the shutdowns, and then now this grand solar minimum, folks, this is a serious snowball, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And food shortages and food increases, which are already happening. You know, food prices are way up, higher than they've ever gone in such a short amount of time, and the reduction of, you know, food stores, food supplies is worse than it's probably ever been, at least since the Great Depression. It's only going to get worse. So you need to start doing your planning and trying to get your game on of how you're going to compensate for all of this hitting. It's like the perfect storm hitting you all at once when it comes to growing your own food. All right, folks, we're getting close to getting home, so I'm going to get off of here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.